This is eternal human spirit, where every story proves why humanity never breaks.
The Council's judgment. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was built to silence even the strongest voices. Its ceiling stretched high into shadows, carved from black stone and filled with glowing lines of alien scripts. At the center stood a vast circle of light where delegates from dozens of species gathered. Each one wore robes or armor that carried the weight of their civilizations. Their eyes, some glowing, some shifting like smoke, were all turned to a single figure. It was the human envoy. His seat looked small compared to the towering thrones around him. He wore no armor, no crown, only a simple dark uniform. His shoulders were heavy, yet his chin was high. He knew why he had been summoned. He knew the words he would hear today. The High Speaker of the Council, a being with 6 silver eyes and a voice like breaking glass, raised a hand. The chamber fell silent. Then came the verdict, cold and sharp. Humanity is declared finished, the speaker said, a species too fragile to last, too divided to grow, too violent to trust. A wave of murmurs followed. Some alien envoys leaned forward, their lips curling in amusement. Others shook their heads as if it were a pity, but not a surprise. The verdict was not just words, it was a sentence. For in this council to be judged finished meant to be cut off from aid, trade, or alliance. It meant isolation. It meant watching your kind fade away while the stars moved on without you. The human envoy's heart pounded, but his face did not break. He remembered the long nights on Earth when nations had once judged themselves doomed. He remembered the cities that had risen from ruins, the children who had learned to smile even in hunger. He remembered the whispers of his grandmother telling him, "We endure, always endure." But here, before the council, none of that mattered yet. All they saw was weakness. One delegate, tall and covered in golden scales, rose from his seat. His voice was smooth but cruel. Humans burn their own forests, poison their own seas, fight their own kind, he said. How can such creatures survive the endless night of the galaxy? His words were met with nods and clicks of approval. Another, a shadow-like being with eyes that glowed red, leaned forward. "You live short lives, and waste even those in conflict," it hissed. "While we think in centuries, you barely see beyond your next day." The chamber filled with laughter, a sound like thunder mixed with screeches. It echoed off the high ceiling, wrapping around the human envoy like chains. Yet the envoy did not lower his gaze. He had known this would come. The council had already made its decision long before today. This trial was only theater. They wanted to humiliate. They wanted to stamp the final seal. The speaker lifted its hand again. "The record will show," it declared, "that humanity has failed the test of survival. We will not waste our strength to protect a race that cannot protect itself. Their wars, their hunger, their weakness, these are their end." Silence followed, a silence so heavy it seemed to choke the air. For the council, the case was closed. Humanity had been measured and found wanting. The human envoy's fists tightened, his nails pressed into his palms. He felt anger rise like fire, but deeper. Still was something colder. Resolve. He stood, not waiting for permission. His voice, though human, carried across the chamber, steady and clear. "You see only our scars," he said, "but not the battles we survived to earn them. You see our mistakes, but not the hands that rise to repair them. You see our short lives, but not the fire that burns within those short years." The council shifted uneasily. Some scoffed, others looked annoyed, but a few leaned back, curious. The envoy's voice did not shake. He knew he was alone. He knew no other ally would speak for him, yet he spoke, not to change their judgment today, but to plant a seed. "You call us finished," he continued, "but humanity has been declared. Finished many times before, by storms, by wars, by hunger, by empires greater than yours. And yet, every time we endure, we are not the strongest, we are not the oldest, but we are the ones who refuse to vanish." The golden-scaled delegate laughed. "Empty words," he said. "Your ships are small, your armies weak, your people divided. You cannot endure what is coming." The envoy's eyes hardened. "Perhaps," he answered, "but if you truly believe that, then you do not know humanity at all." The chamber stirred again. The judgment still hung in the air, but something else now crackled beneath it. A question unspoken, a doubt unformed. For though the council had declared humanity finished, the envoy's voice carried something they had not expected. Conviction, and conviction in the history of the galaxy was often the beginning of storms, the broken image of humanity. The chamber of the Galactic Council still echoed with the human envoy's voice, though silence had fallen once more. The words he had spoken lingered like smoke in the air. Yet the council's verdict did not shift. They had already carved their judgment into the stone walls of history. Humanity to them was a species beyond saving, a race destined to burn itself out like a candle left too long in the wind. And, as the silence stretched, the other delegates began to rise, one by one, not to reconsider, but to tear down the image of humanity even further. The scaled delegate, shimmering in his golden armor, spread his claws wide. His voice carried arrogance. "These humans speak of endurance as if it is a strength. But what is endurance without wisdom? What is endurance without control? They have endured because they are reckless, because they throw themselves into storms without care for survival. A species that cannot measure its steps will always fall. They mistake chaos for bravery, destruction for progress." His words were sharp, and they cut into the chamber like knives. Many delegates nodded, some pounded their staffs in agreement. The envoy listened, his heart steady but heavy. This was not just a judgment, it was humiliation. Another alien rose, her form delicate and crystalline, light bending through her as though she were made of living glass. Her voice rang like bells, but each tone carried mockery. "We, the chorale, study harmony. We build symphonies across our worlds. Our people live centuries in peace, while humans cannot even share a planet without bloodshed. They call themselves civilized, yet their history is nothing but conquest and ruin. From the earliest tribes to their great wars, always the same, one hand building while the other hand burns. How can such a race ever belong in the stars?" The human envoy's jaw tightened. He knew their words came not only from arrogance but from fear. Still, each insult pressed down heavier, building the image the council wanted. Humanity as broken, humanity as weak, humanity as dangerous to itself and unworthy of trust. The shadow being, its red eyes glowing like dying embers, drifted forward, its voice low and cold. "Humans are short-lived creatures. They cling to their brief years with desperation, but such desperation breeds madness. They rush to consume, to claim, to fight. They destroy because they fear their own end, and in that destruction they doom not only themselves, but those around. Them." The words slithered into the chamber like venom. For a moment, the envoy felt crushed beneath the weight of their accusations. They were not wrong about humanity's scars. Humanity had waged wars that scarred the earth. It had poisoned seas. It had torn down forests for greed. He could not deny these truths. The council had studied the archives. They knew humanity's failures as well as humanity knew them, perhaps even better. For a moment, the envoy almost felt as though he stood alone against the sins of all his ancestors, as though every mistake ever made by his kind had gathered behind him as a burden too heavy to carry. But then he remembered something. He remembered the faces of those who had endured beyond those mistakes. He remembered cities rebuilt from ashes, families that rose from poverty, scientists who turned sickness into healing, explorers who risked death to touch the unknown. He remembered the hands of those who pulled others up, not because it was easy, but because it was right. Humanity was not a picture painted only in scars. Humanity was also painted in the light that rose after every fall. And yet the council refused to see that light. The envoy stood once more. His voice was steady, though the weight pressed on his chest. "You speak of our wars, but forget the peace we built after. You speak of our greed, but forget the hands that shared food when there was nothing left. You speak of our short lives, but forget the fire we build inside those short years. You measure us only by our failures, yet every one of those failures became a lesson. Every one of those scars is proof not of weakness, but of survival." The golden-scaled delegate hissed, his claws scraping against the arm of his throne. "Survival is not enough," he growled. "A beast survives, a parasite survives. What makes you different? What makes your kind worthy of standing among us?" The chamber rumbled with agreement. The question was sharp and cruel, and for a heartbeat. The envoy had no answer, for survival alone was not enough. He knew it, humanity knew it, and the council knew it too. That was why they had judged his people so harshly. But then, slowly, a smile touched his lips, not of arrogance, but of something deeper. "What makes us different," he said, "is that when we fall, we rise not only for ourselves, but for each other. We endure not because we are unafraid of death, but because we are unafraid of sacrifice. We endure not because we are perfect, but because we refuse to stay broken. You call us reckless, but that recklessness has carried us beyond oceans, beyond mountains, beyond the skies of our own world. We are not finished. We are only beginning." The chamber stirred uneasily, for though the envoy's words did not erase the council's verdict, they struck something deeper. Some envoys shifted in their seats, whispers flowing like currents. A few even looked thoughtful. For the first time, the perfect image of human weakness began to crack. The envoy had reminded them of something dangerous: hope. Still, the speaker raised its 6 silver eyes, voice like breaking glass. "Enough," it declared. "The judgment is final. Humanity is broken, and the galaxy will move forward without them." The words were sharp, final, but beneath the chamber's silence, beneath the council's certainty, the envoy felt a tremor. It was small, it was hidden, but it was real. For though the council had declared humanity doomed, something in his words had unsettled them, and deep within the envoy's heart, he knew this was only the beginning of the storm to come. The hidden truth. The judgment of the council had been spoken. The chamber echoed with finality. Yet the human envoy did not sink into silence. Instead, he straightened his back, and though every eye was fixed upon him, though every whisper carried disdain, he chose to speak once more. For he knew that if he walked out of this hall today with no answer, then the galaxy would remember humanity only as the council painted them. Broken, reckless, doomed. He could not allow that image to become their legacy. He began slowly, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You call us weak because you see our scars. You call us doomed because you read only our failures. But there is something you do not understand. A truth you have never seen because it does not live in records or archives. It lives in the hearts of our people. It is written in the stories that you never bothered to study." His words stirred faint ripples across the chamber. Some delegates, rolling their eyes, others listening, curious despite themselves. The envoy's gaze lifted toward the towering assembly. "I will tell you what your archives cannot. I will tell you of the fisherman who rowed his boat into a storm to save strangers, though the waves tore his body apart. I will tell you of the mother who carried her children through famine, giving them every scrap of food until her own body gave in. I will tell you of the soldier who stood in the mud of a battlefield, alone, refusing to surrender even when all others had fallen. These are not legends. These are not myths. These are ordinary humans who faced the impossible and chose to endure, chose to give, chose to defy despair. The chamber was restless. Some envoys scoffed, muttering that such tales were meaningless. Yet others leaned forward, drawn not by the envoy's authority but by the weight of his stories. The crystalline being tilted her head, the light inside her refracting as though uncertain, for such examples were not written in the Council's reports, which only measured statistics, weapons, resources, and timelines. They had never studied the spirit, because to them, spirit was intangible, unmeasurable, irrelevant. The envoy pressed on, his voice steady. You think survival is about strength of armies or wealth of empires. You think endurance is measured in years or in victories. But you are wrong. Endurance is measured in sacrifice, in resilience, in the refusal to vanish, even when the universe itself tries to erase us. Every scar we bear tells a story of a storm we faced, and storms, no matter how fierce, have never erased us. His words rose louder, echoing off the chamber walls, the shadow being hissed. Stories will not save you. Sentiment will not keep your species alive. What you call endurance, we call desperation. A flame burns bright, yes, but it dies faster. Your kind is nothing but a candle in the endless dark, soon to be snuffed out. Its words slithered like venom again, sharp and dismissive, but the envoy did not falter. Yes, he said, our lives are short, our time small compared to yours, and yet it is within that short time that we burn brighter than many of you can imagine. We create music that can bring tears, art that survives centuries, science that reshapes the stars. We live knowing death is close, but it is that very closeness that gives meaning to every heartbeat, every step, every act of kindness, and every sacrifice. That is what you cannot understand. That is the truth you overlook. For a long moment, silence followed. The council chamber seemed almost caught. Between ridicule and reflection, some laughed softly, shaking their heads. Others frowned as though unwillingly moved. The envoy felt their uncertainty, and he knew this was his chance to push further. He took a step forward into the light of the chamber, his voice no longer pleading but challenging. You say humanity is finished, but you are blind. Humanity has faced extinction before, by disease, by famine, by war, by disasters greater than any fleet you could unleash. Every time we were declared finished, every time we were told it was the end, and yet every time we rose again. That is our truth. That is our power. Not perfection, not purity, but persistence. Always persistence. Always the will to rise again. The golden-scaled delegate bared his teeth, slamming his claw on the arm of his throne. Words, he spat. Always words. You cannot prove them. You cannot show us this so-called spirit. His anger was fierce, but beneath it, there was something else. Fear. For deep inside, even he knew that no empire, no calculation could fully predict a race that refused to accept defeat. The envoy's eyes did not waver. His voice lowered, calmer now but heavier. Then, wait, he said. You will see it soon enough. You will see what happens when the universe tries to erase us. You will see why humanity is not finished, but only beginning. And when that day comes, it will not be our words that prove us. It will be our actions, our defiance, our endurance, carved into the stars themselves. The chamber once again fell into uneasy silence. But this time, the silence felt different. It was not the silence of dismissal, but of doubt. Some delegates exchanged uncertain glances. Some whispered their judgment had been made. Yes, but a crack had opened. A seed had been planted. The envoy could feel it. He knew the council would not admit it. Not yet. they would cling to their verdict. They would cling to their image of humanity as weak, as broken, as doomed. But the hidden truth was now alive in their minds, a truth they could not erase, no matter how hard they tried. And he knew, as he stood in the center of the chamber, that the day was coming when the galaxy itself would test his words. The predators at the edge of the stars, the storms beyond the borders, something was waiting. And when it came, humanity would show the universe why their spirit never breaks. The council chamber had been restless after the envoy's words. His voice had planted a seed of doubt, but still most delegates clung to their verdict. Humanity was broken. Humanity was doomed. Humanity would fade. That was the judgment written into the records. Yet as the envoys returned to their seats and the council prepared to move to other matters, a sudden disturbance shattered the rhythm. Of the hall, a messenger drone glided swiftly into the chamber, its glowing lights pulsing in alarm. The high speaker paused, its 6 silver eyes narrowing as the drone unfolded and spoke in a voice that was not its own, but that of a trembling observer from a distant outpost. "The Predator fleet has crossed the borders," the voice said, its tone urgent. "They strike without warning. Colonies are burning. Entire systems cry for aid. We request immediate reinforcements." The words rolled across the chamber like thunder, and for a heartbeat, the hall was frozen in silence. Then chaos erupted. Delegates rose from their thrones, voices clashing in panic and outrage. Some demanded immediate action, others refused to commit their forces. Some spoke of treaties, others of debts unpaid. But beneath their arguments was fear, raw and sharp. The Predator fleet was not a myth. It was a shadow on the edge of the galaxy, a relentless swarm that consumed all it touched. To face them was to face annihilation. The High Speaker called for order, but its voice was drowned by the storm of fear and selfish debate. Some envoys argued their fleets were too far. Others claimed their people could not be risked. The chamber that once felt like a monument of power now sounded like a marketplace of cowards. Every alien voice sought to save its own skin, even as colonies screamed for rescue. And then all eyes turned, almost unwillingly, toward the human envoy. He had not spoken since. The news arrived. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. The speaker's voice cut through the noise, sharp as glass. "Human," it said, "do you still claim endurance when even you cannot stand against this? Your fleets are small. Your weapons outdated. You have no allies. Will you still speak of spirit now?" The envoy rose slowly, his heart pounding. He could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him, many expecting fear, many expecting silence. But he knew this was the moment. The test he had spoken of was no longer distant. It was here, and if humanity faltered now, the council's judgment would become prophecy. He drew in a long breath, then spoke, his voice firm, though the storm of fear swirled around him. "Yes," he said, "we will stand. Our fleets are small, our weapons are weak, but we will not run. Humanity will meet the predators at the border, and we will hold them as long as we can." The chamber rippled with shock. Some envoys laughed bitterly, mocking his defiance. Others stared in disbelief. "Madness," muttered the crystalline delegate, her light trembling. "To throw yourselves against such a force is suicide." The golden-scaled envoy sneered. "Foolish to the end. You will burn first, and the galaxy will forget you." But the human envoy's voice did not shake. "Perhaps we will burn," he said, "but we will not be erased. If humanity is to fall, then we will fall standing, not crawling, and when the predators come for your worlds, remember who bought you time with their blood." The council chamber fell into heavy silence. The words echoed in their ears, raw and unshakable. They could dismiss stories, they could laugh at scars, but they could not ignore what was unfolding before them. Humanity had been declared finished. Yet it was humanity that now stepped forward to face the impossible while the galaxy hesitated. Far away, on the outer colonies, the truth of the envoy's words was already being written. Human fleets, small and battered, were mobilizing. Ships that were old and worn were pulled from dry docks. Farmers and miners volunteered. As soldiers, families kissed their loved ones goodbye, knowing they might never return. On worlds where resources were scarce, people still offered everything they had to fuel the fight. There was no hesitation, no waiting for reinforcements, for humanity knew what it meant to endure. The first battles came swift and brutal. Predator ships darkened the skies of human colonies. Their weapons cut through defenses like fire through paper. Yet the humans fought, and they fought with a ferocity that startled even the predators. They fought not for conquest, not for wealth, but for survival, for family, for the right to exist. Ships that should have fled charged head-on, crews choosing sacrifice over surrender. Across the galaxy, transmissions of these battles reached unwilling ears. Alien worlds watched in silence. As human voices crackled through broken comms, "We are outnumbered, but we hold the line. They breach the skies, but we are still here. If we fall, let it be known. We fought to the last breath." These words, carried on the winds of war, spread faster than the Council's verdict, and for the first time, doubt began to grow like fire among those who had declared humanity finished. In the chamber, the speaker's voice was low, almost uncertain. "Why?" it asked. "Why would you throw your kind into a storm that cannot be won?" The envoy's eyes burned as he answered, "Because endurance is not about winning every battle. It is about refusing to vanish. It is about giving the next generation a chance to rise. It is about showing the galaxy that humanity may bend, but humanity does not break." The Council could not answer, for though their verdict remained, the proof of humanity's spirit was unfolding in the stars beyond their chamber. And as the Predator fleet pushed harder, and as humanity pushed back with blood and fire, the galaxy began to witness a truth no judgment could erase. Humanity was not finished. Humanity was tested again, and in the fire of that test, the spirit of mankind was beginning to shine, brighter than the Council had ever imagined. The defiance of the few. The Predator fleet moved like a storm through the void, its dark ships blotting out the light of distant suns. Each vessel was massive, bristling with weapons designed not for war, but for extermination. They were not conquerors. They were erasers, leaving behind only silence where once life had thrived. The galaxy had whispered of them in fear, and now humanity faced them head-on, with fleets that looked like ants before a tidal wave. On the edge of the human colonies, a battered line of starships assembled. They were not the finest the galaxy had seen. Their hulls bore scars of old wars, their engines wheezed with age, their weapons were patched and overworked. But within those fragile shells beat the hearts of people who refused to surrender. Every captain knew the odds. Every soldier knew the fate awaiting them. Yet none turned back. They had no illusions of easy victory. They had only a promise to hold the line. The first clash was brutal. Predator vessels unleashed fire that split human ships apart as if they were made of paper. Entire crews vanished in bursts of flame and wreckage. The Predators expected the rest to scatter, to flee as so many other species had before. But instead, the humans pressed forward, damaged ships ramming into enemy hulls, fighters diving into impossible gaps, destroyers firing even as their own cores melted. Across the stars, alien observers watched in disbelief, their screens filled with scenes of chaos. Yet within that chaos was something terrifying. Humans did not retreat. They fought as if every breath, every second, every drop of blood had meaning. A single human frigate, broken in half, still managed to fire one last volley that crippled a Predator battleship before finally exploding into light. The crew's final transmission was simple, their voices calm even in death. "Tell them we did not run." The council chamber received those transmissions in real time. The delegates sat in silence, the earlier mocking words now caught in their throats. The crystalline envoy who had laughed at human division leaned forward, her light trembling as she whispered, "They fight, like they have nothing left to lose." The golden-scaled envoy shook his head, though his claws tapped restlessly. "They fight like madmen. It will not save them." Yet even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed unease. In the midst of the chaos, one ship rose above the others, a HFY carrier known as the Resolute. Its captain was an aging man with hair turned white from years of war. His body was frail, but his eyes burned with a fire younger than the stars around him. His ship had been meant for decommissioning, but now it bore the weight of hope. The captain's voice echoed across the human fleet, steady and unshakable. "We are the wall between our homes and the void. We are the line they must cross, and we will hold until our last breath." His words carried beyond the fleet, transmitted. Across channels the predators could hear. The alien swarm mocked his defiance, their commanders certain it would collapse in moments. But when their next wave struck, the humans did not yield. The Resolute took the lead, its battered hull absorbing strike after strike, yet still firing, still refusing to fall. Around it, smaller ships formed a shield, not to protect themselves but to protect their people. Every act of defiance carried a price. Families on Earth and the colonies listened to fragmented messages. From their loved ones at the front, a mother whispered to her child that she loved him one last time before her ship plunged into the heart of an enemy cruiser. A young cadet cried quietly in his cockpit before charging headlong into fire, knowing he would not return. A medic on a crippled destroyer tended to the wounded even as fire consumed the corridors, refusing to abandon them until the end. These stories spread like sparks, and together they lit a fire that burned brighter than the predator's weapons. In the council chamber, many delegates could no longer mock. Some turned their eyes away. Ashamed, others stared as though hypnotized. They had called humanity reckless, doomed, broken, yet what they saw was a kind of courage they could not name. The shadow being hissed, its voice faltering. They should have fled. They should have surrendered. Why do they fight when there is no chance? The human envoy, still standing in the chamber, answered with a voice that cut through the silence. "Because surrender is not in our nature. Because even if we stand alone, we will stand, because the human spirit does not bow, even when the universe itself demands it." As battles raged, reports came that predator vessels were slowing, not because they lacked strength, but because they were unsettled. They had crushed countless civilizations, but never had they met. Prey that refused to scatter. They faced not an army, but a spirit, and that spirit gnawed at their confidence. For the first time, the predators hesitated. The council did not admit it, but they too felt it. The verdict they had stamped so proudly now trembled beneath the weight of human defiance. Humanity had been declared finished, yet in the face of impossible odds, they had become something greater. The few who stood against the many had transformed weakness into a weapon. Every burning ship, every last transmission, every sacrifice, was rewriting the judgment of the galaxy, and as the battle stretched into endless night, humanity's defiance carved a message across the stars, a message that even death could not silence. We may fall, but we will never break. The unbreakable spirit. The predator fleet was vast, its shadows covering whole systems, yet no matter how many human ships they destroyed, more appeared, battered and small, but unyielding. The predators had expected victory to come quickly, as it had against countless others. Instead, they found themselves dragged into a battle that refused to end. Every time they struck, the humans rose again. Every time they thought the line had broken, they saw new sparks of resistance. It was not strategy alone that kept the humans standing. It was something deeper, something even the predators could not understand. On colony worlds, ordinary people, transformed into defenders, Farmers who once tilled the soil now carried rifles. Engineers who once built homes now welded weapons. Children too young for war became messengers, carrying food, water, and hope to those on the front lines. They were not soldiers by design, but they became soldiers by necessity. Their willpower was forged not in academies or war schools, but in the simple determination to protect one another. They were fighting not for conquest, but for survival, and that gave them a strength the predators had never faced before. The predators brought overwhelming firepower. Their fleets darkened the stars, their weapons shattered shields, but humanity answered with something that could not be measured in numbers. A frigate, with half its engines gone, dragged itself forward into the enemy's path, blocking them long, enough for evacuation ships to escape. A squad of pilots, out of ammunition, rammed their fighters into predator cruisers, turning their own deaths into weapons. Civilians on the ground, cornered and surrounded, fought with whatever they had. Tools, stones, their bare hands. The predators learned quickly that to defeat humans meant to destroy not only bodies but entire worlds willing to bleed together. Across the galaxy, transmissions of these moments spread. The council that had declared humanity finished now sat, in silence, watching. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the humans they had mocked as divided now fought with unity that shamed entire empires. A crystalline envoy who once laughed at human bloodshed now whispered, "They carry their scars like banners." The golden-scaled delegate clenched his jaw, no longer sneering but staring, unblinking. The shadow being, whose kind valued fear as power, shivered in unease, for the humans did not fear the end, they defied it. In the council chamber, the human envoy stood tall. He did not shout, he did not beg. He simply let the images of his people speak for themselves. Every burning ship, every sacrifice, every cry of defiance was proof of what he had tried to tell them. Humanity was not finished. Humanity was unbreakable. The predators themselves began to falter. Their commanders were efficient and merciless, yet confusion spread through their ranks. They had expected prey. Instead, they found an enemy that welcomed death if it meant protecting others. They could destroy ships, but not the spirit behind them. They could burn cities, but even in the ashes, they faced resistance. This was something alien to them, something that shook even their hardened hearts. On Earth, messages from the front lines poured in. Families gathered in dark rooms to listen to the voices of loved ones far away. Some messages were filled with hope, others with sorrow, but all carried the same strength. A young pilot told his mother, "I am afraid, but I will not stop." A dying engineer whispered to his children, "You will live, because I will not let this line break." These words spread like fire, igniting courage in those who heard them. Humanity's unbreakable spirit was not in one hero, not in one battle, but in every soul who refused to surrender. The council delegates had seen empires fall before. They had witnessed civilizations wiped out by the predators, but never had they seen this, a species that refused to die quietly, a people who fought with their hearts even when logic said all was lost. Some began to whisper privately that perhaps they had judged too quickly, perhaps endurance was more than just survival. It was this unshakable will. The envoy caught those whispers in their eyes, and he knew the council's verdict was already beginning to crack. On the battlefield, the predators unleashed their greatest weapons, tearing through lines of defense, scattering fleets, and scorching worlds. But still, the humans endured. For every city destroyed, another rose to resist. For every ship burned, another carried the fight. For every soldier lost, another stood in their place. They bent, they bled, but they did not break. And that refusal became their greatest weapon, one the predators could not counter. The old captain of the Resolute still commanded at the front. His ship was crippled, its hull torn open, yet it remained in formation. His voice came across the comms, steady and defiant. We have nothing left to give but ourselves, so we will give it gladly. Humanity does not fall today. Humanity endures. His words were carried across the stars, recorded in transmissions, whispered in homes, shouted in trenches. They became more than orders. They became a vow. The predators pressed harder, but with every moment, their confidence cracked. What they faced was not just a fleet, not just an army, but a spirit that refused to vanish. The humans had been judged as finished, yet here they stood, bleeding, burning, but unbroken. Their endurance had become something more, something greater. It was not survival. It was defiance. It was not just resistance. It was proof. Proof that the human spirit was stronger than fear, stronger than despair, stronger even than death. And as the battles stretched into endless days, as the predators grew weary of endless defiance, the galaxy began to whisper a different truth. Humanity was not finished. Humanity was becoming legend. The verdict rewritten. The war at the border burned on. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Yet the human line did not collapse. It bent, it bled, it cracked, but it never shattered. The Predator fleet, a swarm that had erased countless civilizations, now found itself in a battle unlike any it had ever faced. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they hesitated. They struck and struck again, but their victories felt hollow. For each time they silenced a human voice, 10 more rose in defiance. Each death only deepened the fire of those still living. Each loss only gave birth to greater courage. Humanity was teaching the predators a lesson they had never learned before, that strength is not measured by numbers or weapons alone, but by the refusal to bow even in the shadow of extinction. And the galaxy watched. From distant systems, transmissions of the battles spread like wildfire. Aliens who had once mocked humanity now whispered their names with awe. Families on worlds that had once turned their backs now sat in silence as they watched humans fight not only for themselves, but for the safety of others who had abandoned them. It was not just a war anymore. It was a story that could not be ignored. Every burning ship, every final stand, every last breath of resistance carved itself into the collective memory of the stars. In the council chamber, the delegates grew restless. They had judged humanity as finished, but now every new report challenged that judgment. The crystalline envoy who had once mocked human wars now spoke softly. They bleed, but they do not break. The shadow being who thrived on fear now hissed with unease. They fear, yet their fear does not stop them. The golden-scaled delegate, once so sure of human weakness, clenched his claws and admitted nothing. Yet his silence spoke louder than his arrogance ever had. Even the high speaker, with its 6 silver eyes, cold and sharp, paused longer with every transmission, as though doubt had begun to slip into the cracks of its certainty, and still the human envoy stood in the chamber, silent now, no longer speaking, for he knew words were no longer needed. His people were speaking through their actions, through their blood and their defiance. The council had called humanity finished, yet every moment of resistance shouted a different truth. The predators, relentless and merciless, launched their greatest push, a massive wave meant to crush the human line once and for all. Dozens of human ships fell in minutes. Cities burned, defenses shattered. It seemed the end had truly come, and yet, in the heart of the chaos, the Resolute remained. Its captain, weary and broken, stood at the bridge, fire licking the walls around him. His ship had no weapons left, no engines to flee, no hope of survival. And still his voice came across the comms, steady as stone. This is humanity. We do not surrender. We do not bow. If we must die, then we die standing. Let the galaxy remember, humanity never breaks. With those words, the Resolute drove itself into the heart of the Predator flagship, a final desperate strike. The explosion tore through the void, shattering the Predator command structure. For a moment, silence fell across the battlefield, a silence heavy with awe. The Predators recoiled, stunned, their advance faltering, and in that pause, the humans surged forward, battered ships dragging themselves into the fight once more, refusing to let the sacrifice of the resolute be in vain. The Predators withdrew, not defeated in numbers but defeated in spirit. They had come to erase humanity, yet humanity had shown them something stronger than fear, stronger than death. The Predators had faced unbreakable will, and in the end, even they chose to turn away. Back in the council chamber, the silence was absolute. Delegates who had once laughed at humanity now sat pale and speechless. The images of the battle played before them, the sacrifice of the resolute, the cries of humans who fought until their last breath. The speaker, who had once declared humanity finished, now found no words. Its 6 eyes blinked slowly, as though it, too, struggled to understand what it had witnessed. The human envoy stepped forward into the silence. His voice was steady, not raised in triumph, not filled with arrogance, but calm, clear, and heavy with truth. You judged us finished. You saw only our scars, only our mistakes, only our short lives. But now you have seen the truth. You have seen why we endure, not because we are perfect, not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to break. We rise when we are pushed down. We stand when we are told to kneel. We fight even when hope is gone. That is humanity. That is who we are. The chamber was still. Some delegates lowered their eyes in shame. Others stared at the envoy as though seeing him for the first time. No one spoke, no one dared, for they all knew the truth now. The verdict they had stamped so proudly was no longer valid. It had been rewritten in fire and blood, not by words, but by actions. Humanity had endured, and in doing so had reshaped its place in the stars. At last the High Speaker rose, its silver eyes dimmer than before. Its voice, once sharp and cold, now carried something unfamiliar. Humanity, it said slowly, is not finished. The words echoed through the chamber, a quiet acknowledgement, a reluctant respect. The envoy did not bow. He only nodded, for he did not seek their approval. Humanity had already proven itself, not to the council, but to the galaxy. And so the record was changed, not by decree, but by truth. The galaxy would remember this war. It would remember the defiance, the sacrifice, the unbreakable spirit. Humanity had been judged as doomed. Yet they had endured, and from that day on, the stars carried a new truth, whispered across worlds and written in history. Humanity never breaks.
Thank you for joining Eternal Human Spirit, where humanity always rises again.